this mentee, it would be major changes in his
Yes,
lifestyle.
yes.
So it's really a multiple problem. It's not.
Yes, and this is a perfect example of why we thought it was very important that we measure prosocial change as well as recidivism. If you only measure recidivism, you have no indication that anything is changing. All you see is that, whoops, this kid just recommitted a crime.
Yep.
You don't know if he's making progress in one of those areas, right? So, but to answer kind of in a general way, that question, the forms that we have, the questionnaires that we have are worded such that it isn't in a particular thing, so it's sort of generalized. This kind of study, we necessarily have to take sort of broad strokes. It's the way research works. You kind of get the big picture down first, and then you can start looking at, you know, finer and finer grained questions. So right now, because there's so little research in this, we're aiming for the broad strokes. So let's see, you had a question, go ahead.
So do you have a number in mind in terms of your study? Like
Number of
mentors and mentees?
Yes, sadly, we are constrained by budget. So we know exactly how many. The way we do this is there are things called power analyses. There are statistical methods that let us know how many youth we need to gather data on in order to see the first effect. And so we did power analyses for this grant. And what we ended up was with 75 youth is how many kids that we'll be recruiting over the next 3 years. So, and mentors, originally we didn't think there would be so many of you, so we're extremely pleased and surprised about how many, because the truth is the more people that you have in a study, the more reliable are the results. That's just a fact. So I think you had a question too.
So some of us are mentoring certified kids, 3 of whom are already in prison.
Yeah.
Will you have access to them?
That is sort of an open question right now. We have access through Harris County for kids who are not in our study, but the certified kids are kind of a whole different thing, and when we first wrote this grant we didn't take that into consideration, so we'll be working on that. We still, though, the information that you would be able to give about the kid, about your experience, is still very valuable because it tells us a lot about that relationship. Whether or not we can track them or not, we're still working on. So, and sir?
Yeah, I filled out the questionnaire, whatever you want to call it. If the mentee, do they have about the same forms, or
They
theirs
are
different, or?
some of well, they have a lot more. So whereas the forms that we're asking you all to fill out and the questionnaires take about maximum 30 minutes. Theirs are 2.5 to 3 hours. So we're looking at a lot more things. You know, we're looking at their cognitive skills, their memory, their impulsivity, for instance, which you can imagine might have a big effect on whether or not they commit a crime. We're looking at this process of change. There are several different measures that we can look at with that, which we're not doing with that. I actually, in retrospect, we think that would have been fascinating to see if there is some change that you all are going through as a consequence of this, but missed that one. So it would be it'd be a great study. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Is the baseline of your study first categorizing the kids as in pre-contemplation or total denial, or wherever they are in their stages of change? Is that your baseline? Is that where you start? You try to categorize the kid as to where we came upon him?
If I understand your question, you're asking, the answer is yes. We are interested in knowing, I guess basically what we're working with here. Are we talking about kids who have no interest in change at all?
That's my question.
Yeah. Or are we talking about kids who are starting to get an inkling that maybe this is not the right road? We don't really know. There may be a mix. In fact, I'm pretty certain there is a mix. But where, you know, exactly what is the most common, what is the median, we don't know. As you can imagine, that may have some programmatic importance. And so we think that this is going to be really important information. Yes?
I just make the observation that the mentors are pretty different ethnically, culturally, et cetera, from the kids.
Yes, they are.
Now, I mean, that could raise barriers, or, I mean, maybe it's an opportunity when you're trying to bring about change. I don't know, do you have any comments on that?
Well, we're interested in that, but that is what we call an uncontrolled variable. We cannot do anything about it. You know, you mentors are who you are, and those kids are who they are, and there is a pretty big gap between them. It will be interesting to see how that works out. But I can say that in other research that have looked at the mentor-mentee relationship, that was not necessarily one of the biggest things. Bigger things, much bigger things, were trust, reliability, and, how can I say this? Basically, the youth's idea or the mentee's idea of what you can do for them. So those end up being pretty big things. Not very many people have looked at personality, what personality match might be. I've only found 1 or 2 studies have looked at locus of control to see whether or not, you know, the mentor can influence the mentee or vice versa. So we are going to have a fabulously rich data set to work with, and we should get a huge amount of information. Fortunately, our research team has gotten very large. I feel so grateful that many different people in the community have been very interested in this research and have come to us and asked us to do internships and things like that. My colleague Einar Hernandez here, who will be doing some of the testing, is one such person. So we have a lot of hands on deck, so we can collect quite a bit of information here and process it. Any other questions? Yes?
So is the study to match, I mean, do you take a mentee and a mentor at the beginning point when the child was arrested at their first meeting? Or are you meeting with us at whatever stage we're in with someone now?
So the measures that we're doing on you, I mean, we would love to do a longitudinal study on the mentors as well. We're going to try and squeeze some of that in. Unfortunately, the grant didn't make that accommodation, so we have to get permission to do that. Some of the measures, most of the measures that we're going to give you all, we don't expect to change so much over time. They're more like stable kinds of things, like personality shouldn't change over time. Locus of control should not change over time. And the other things are things that we do expect to change, like when we ask about what the cost benefit is. You won't know that unless you've actually had some experience with this youth. So what we'd like to do is get everything we can at baseline and then hope to maybe repeat a couple of these that might change over time, like the cost benefit measure and the experience of mentoring measure later on, but we have not yet gotten permission to do that. We don't anticipate any trouble with that, but every single thing we do, we have to go through the internal review board of Baylor College of Medicine, and they have to say, yes, it's okay. So, yes?
If I can make an observation or comment about my opinion and address what he asked. I volunteer with several organizations, and this is a setting most of the time. I'm generally one of the few minorities that do so. And there was one gentleman who was asking about the difficulty, and I told him, and from my experience, and what I've worked with kids a lot, when kids find out and really convinced that you really care, you don't care what color, the color fades away.
That's right.
The ethnicity fades away. Now, you're going to have a little bit more barrier to overcome because they think you don't really know me, you don't understand, and it may require a little longer to get their trust. But once you do, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think that's reflected in the literature as well. The same with socioeconomic status. Interestingly, one of the things that does seem to matter is gender. So we'll see what comes up with that. Any other questions? All right then, then I'm going, oh, okay, sorry.
I just wondered when you anticipate publishing the results of the study.
Oh, well,
Unfair question.
I have to say, this has been so far one of the best projects that I've had the pleasure of working on. We have gotten a huge amount of response, a huge cooperation from everyone. It's made the project go very, very smoothly. A lot of my other research is in childhood head injury, and I can tell you that those projects have not worked so smoothly. So the question is usually when you have enough data to publish something. You can't just collect data on 6 kids and 6 mentors and publish it because it's not reliable. But we have already gotten around 10 kids in the pipeline in the month and a half that we've gotten permission to start. So we anticipate that actually recruitment may go a little faster than we thought. We're going to be doing a kind of a side study that we thought about for looking at pro-social change this summer with Charles' help. And we anticipate that we'll be able to work that data up pretty quickly because it's a cross-sectional. That means you get a lot of people just at one time. So we aren't following them. Because this is a longitudinal study, the very first time that we could even look at data is a year from now. You see, because we want to test them at that 12-month point. And so then it will be how many kids, we recruit between now and then how long it takes us to get, a reasonable amount of data. Usually for doing statistical analyses, the number 30 is sort of magical. So we hope to get around 30 kids before we can do a preliminary analyses. So, any other questions? Right, well then, I think we're going to hand out these little sheets to you and ask you to, April, can I have them?